Leonardo da Vinci was Italian. That was the story. Born in Tuscany, raised among olive groves and stone hills, shaped entirely by the particular light of the Italian Renaissance. That sentence has appeared in thousands of biographies across 5 centuries. It was not exactly wrong, but it was incomplete in ways that stretch far beyond geography. In April of 2024, a microbial geneticist named Norberto Gonzalez Werby stood in a private New York City collection and pressed a dry swab, the kind used in pandemic testing, against the surface of a red chalk drawing known as Holy Child. The drawing shows a young boy's face tilted softly downward, features dissolving at their edges in Leonardo's characteristic sfumato haze. Its authorship is disputed. The question of who made it is precisely why Gonzalez Werby was swabbing it. What the laboratory extracted from that surface opened a thread that runs backward 5 centuries, not only into Renaissance Florence, but into the North Caucasus, into Black Sea coast, into a world of displacement and survival that no biography of Leonardo had ever entered. Hold the haplogroup designation E1B1B in your mind. In a few minutes, it will mean something different than it does right now. This is not a story that diminishes the painter of the Mona Lisa. It is a story that makes him harder to contain, and far more extraordinary than the simple myth aloud. The evidence has been building for years. 2 completely separate investigations, conducted by people who did not know about each other, arrived at the same place. Stay with this. The accepted biography begins simply. On the 15th of April, 1452, in the Tuscan hill town of Anciano near Vinci, an illegitimate child was born to a wealthy notary named Ser Piero da Vinci. The mother's name was Caterina. Beyond that, the record offered almost nothing. She was described in most accounts as a local peasant girl, young, poor, without a surname worth preserving. Ser Piero did not marry her. He arranged a marriage for her with a local farmer, kept the child, and built his own respectable family with a Florentine wife. The scholar Martin Kemp of Oxford, among the most respected Leonardo authorities of the modern era, identified a woman named Caterina di Lippi, an orphan teenager from the hills near Vinci, as the most plausible candidate. His conclusion was methodologically careful. It was also, quite likely, wrong. The first crack appeared not in a genetics laboratory, but in the state archives of Florence. The man who found it was Carlo Vecchi, a professor at the University of Naples L'Orientale and a career Leonardo scholar. He was not searching for a discovery about Leonardo's mother. He was researching a historical novel. In those archives, working through notarial documents from the mid-15th century, he found a Latin certificate dated the 2nd of November, 1452. It was signed by Ser Piero da Vinci. It recorded the emancipation of an enslaved woman named Caterina, described as Circassian, from the eastern coast of the Black Sea. Vecchi was, by his own account, the wrong person to make this find. He had spent years dismissing the idea that Leonardo's mother was a foreign-born slave. He found it too convenient, too sensationalist. I simply found it impossible to believe, he said, that the mother of the greatest Italian genius would be a non-Italian slave. His instinct was to disprove the document, not pursue it. The document would not cooperate. In all of Ser Piero da Vinci's long notarial career, hundreds of legal instruments across decades, he wrote precisely one Emancipation Act for an enslaved woman named Caterina. 1. Written in the months immediately following his illegitimate son's birth. And it bore something else unusual. Small errors, minor imprecisions in the Latin phrasing that were uncharacteristic of a trained professional. Vecchi, who had read Ser Piero's work closely for years, recognized him. A calm notary does not make careless mistakes in routine documents. Vecchi traced Caterina's documented history through the Florentine archives. She had arrived in Italy as a child, sold and resold along eastern Mediterranean trade routes, through Constantinople, then Venice, then Florence, where she entered a household as domestic labor. She was a teenager when she encountered Ser Piero. Their son was born without legal standing from her side. This is evidence track 1, archival, documentary, anchored in a signature that has waited 600 years to be read carefully. Keep the Circassian origin in mind. It is about to converge with something else entirely. The second track began with a completely separate problem. An international collective of more than 30 scientists, the Leonardo DNA Project, had been attempting for years to reconstruct Leonardo's genetic profile. The challenge was structural. Leonardo died in 1519, left no direct descendants, and his burial site in Amboise was disturbed in the early 19th century. There are no confirmed remains. Their solution was methodological. Genealogists Alessandro Vezzosi and Agni Sabato spent 30 years reconstructing the Da Vinci family tree through parish registers, wills, and deeds spanning 21 generations and more than 400 individuals. They identified 15 living male descendants of Leonardo's father. 6 agreed to DNA testing. Their Y chromosomes matched across key segments, confirming the genetic continuity of the Da Vinci male line from at least the 15th generation forward. Then came the swab from Holy Child. The team also extracted DNA from 15th century letters written by Frosino di Ser Giovanni da Vinci, Leonardo's grandfather's cousin. Dr. Charles Lee, a Y chromosome specialist at the Jackson Laboratory, whose team had mapped 43 complete human Y chromosomes in a 2023 paper published in Nature, received the blinded sequence data and ran it against approximately 90,000 known genetic markers. For samples, from both the drawing and the letters, converge on the same haplogroup, E1b1b. There's a designation. Now it means something different. This is where the two tracks meet. The documentary track, Vecchi's Florence Archives, a liberation certificate signed by Leonardo's own father, a Circassian enslaved woman freed 6 months after her son's birth, a son who would eventually paint the most recognized face in human history. The genetic track, 30 years of genealogical reconstruction, 6 living descendants, a dry swab press against a 500-year-old drawing, and a haplogroup classification, E1b1b, appearing in both a disputed Leonardo work and a confirmed Da Vinci family letter. Neither team knew about the other's work. Vecchi was in the archives pursuing a novel. Lee's group at the Jackson Laboratory was responding to an invitation from the Leonardo DNA Project in late 2024. They arrived at the same place by entirely different roads. And there's a third detail that receives almost no coverage. Long before either investigation began, anthropologist Luigi Capasso reconstructed a fingerprint from Leonardo's known works. The dermatoglyphic analysis identified a central world pattern found predominantly in North Caucasian and Middle Eastern populations. Approximately 60% of individuals from those ancestries display the same structure. This is not a genetic test. Its evidentiary weight is limited and contested. But as an independent third observation, it points in the same direction, that Leonardo da Vinci carried in his biology an inheritance that reached far beyond Tuscany. To understand why this took 500 years to surface, you must understand what the 15th century Mediterranean slave trade actually was. It was not marginal. Scholars estimate that approximately 550 enslaved individuals were registered in Florence alone at the time of Leonardo's birth. The majority were women and girls transported from the Circassian and Georgian highlands through Constantinople or the Crimean port of Caffa, then by sea into Italian households. They were baptized upon arrival and given Christian names. Caterina was among the most common. The system was institutional. Ottoman expansion into the Black Sea had generated the supply. Italian merchant networks had the trade routes and the legal infrastructure to normalize the practice within domestic life. Children born from those relationships had no legal standing through their mothers. If the father claimed the child was raised as free. Leonardo was. But his mother's origins, her world, her name, the land she came from, belonged precisely to the category of fact that the official record did not preserve unless a notary happened to document a moment of emancipation in careful Latin. Leonardo's case is not unique in structure. It is unique only in the magnitude of the name attached to it. Genealogists have documented scores of similar patterns across Renaissance-era Italian families. The historian Deborah Blumenthal named the process the evaporation of the enslaved mother from the official record. None of this diminishes what Leonardo built. The anatomical drawings, the engineering notebooks, the Mona Lisa, all of it belonged to him entirely. His genius was his own. The historical system surrounding his birth does not explain it, own it, or reduce it. But it does complicate the tidy biography that placed him wholly inside the Italian Renaissance as its purest expression. The Liberation document dated the 2nd of November, 1452 still exists. It sits in the State Archives of Florence. It is paper and ink and a signature, the signature of a man who made uncharacteristic errors when he drafted it, who was perhaps not calm, who wrote the word to recover her freedom and recover her human dignity 6 months after his son was born. The haplogroup E1b1b points backward through centuries. The swab, the letters, the fingerprint pattern, the archives, they all point in the same direction without ever fully meeting. What they cannot tell us is what Caterina knew, whether she understood, in the years after her emancipation, what her son would become, whether she ever saw it. That is the question the science cannot answer. That is the one that remains.